Hello and welcome to Deprogrammed with Carrie Smith. I am your host, Carrie. Thank you for tuning in on a Thursday. We are bringing you another interview tonight. I'm very excited about today's interview. I just described this guest to my husband as, he's like, who are you talking to today? And I'm like, a real badass today. She is a wife, a mother. She's based in California. She has become pretty prominent online because of speaking at school board meetings and, fitting all of these concepts into little 90-second clips that can be easily understood. She spoke at a Kelly Jane Keene rally, and she has a lot to say about gender ideology. So please welcome Allie Snyder. Hello, Allie.
Hello, thank you.
Thank you for being here on Deprogrammed. I just want to give a quick thank you to our mod Pirate Tomsky, who sent me one of your viral videos of you speaking at a meeting and has been very persistent to make sure we speak. And truly, thank you, Pirate.
Yes, thank you very
for
much.
helping us connect. So for anyone who hasn't seen your videos, I just want to, and we're going to link to some stuff below in the description. We may even have time to show a short clip. Can you just tell people a little bit about yourself? I said you're a wife and mother in California. Like, who are you? If you were to describe yourself to people who don't know you?
Well, I am, just a woman, a wife, and and a mother who became really kind of activated in this push against gender ideology through a variety of paths in my life. So I actually have a loved one that I'm very close to who came out to me as an adult 13 years ago as having been born in the wrong body. And at the time, I really didn't understand much about any of this. And so I did all the things that I thought we're supposed to do, where I affirmed, I used the pronouns. And at the time, it made a certain amount of sense to me because my loved one had suffered severe trauma as a child and had just been suicidal and really struggling ever since. And so when they came to me as an adult with this explanation, I thought it made sense.
This explains it, right?
Yeah, I thought, oh, okay, well, this must be what's been wrong this whole time. And I'm a compassion. Oh, go ahead.
You're still based in California, right?
Yeah. So I was born and raised in California. Maybe I should start there since I'm not wholly consumed exclusively with pushing back against gender ideology. I do have other things about myself.
Yes.
Born and raised in California. I actually grew up here in the same town I live in Davis, California.
And I bring that up because it's pretty. I used to live in Los Angeles, very different than Davis, but it's pretty left-leaning in terms of politics, right?
Oh, yeah.
Culture.
Oh, yeah. Yes. So I grew up default on the left. This town is incredibly, incredibly left-leaning. I would go so far as to say far left at this point. And I just grew up, that was my default understanding of how the world worked. And, things on the right were demonized. I grew up thinking that the Republican Party was a party of intolerance and greed. Yeah.
There's a lot of psychological things in my experience that kind of kept me from being able to see people who were Republicans as humans.
Yeah.
Like being interested in any of their opinions because I thought I knew them already.
Yeah, absolutely. It was only in the last few years that it really occurred to me that my mind was just in this box. I thought of myself as an open-minded person because I was compassionate and kind and loving, except for all those evil.
Yes. I'm laughing because I get it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And I was just, I didn't realize how I had grown up so really intolerant of Christians and other religious people, really intolerant of Republicans. And yeah, I didn't realize quite how close-minded I was.
so that's who you were like round about the time your friend 13 years ago talked to you about being born in the wrong body?
Yes. Yeah. So I had just given birth to my first son, and my when my loved one came to me, that my kindness, my compassion, my all of that led me to believe that the right thing to do was to affirm them.
Right.
And I went clothes shopping with them and helped them get clothes that would help them feel comfortable. And I helped other people who are very close to us come to grips with this new identity. And at this point, I don't think that I'll ever really forgive myself for helping usher our loved one down this path of medicalization. Over the last 13 years, I've watched them just become progressively more and more dependent upon big pharma and the gender medical industry. And I became increasingly uncomfortable with every new medical procedure, but particularly because it didn't seem to alleviate any of the mental distress. Now, I'm being very careful about how I speak about this person because they're still, and my other loved ones are still very captured by the idea that this was the right thing to do for them and that this has somehow saved their life. And I no longer feel that way. So I'm trying to be very careful not to.
But you still have feelings and compassion and love for your friend. So
Yeah,
it's tricky, right?
it is tricky. So they've since lost their primary sex organ, right? So they've had every single medical procedure they could possibly have. They've lost their primary sex organ. They can no longer make their own hormones. So regardless of how they move forward in the world, whether they continue to try to live with this identity, or if they realize that they've been duped, it doesn't matter. They will always be dependent on big pharma and
permanent
insurance
patient.
companies, a permanent medical patient. And they are being murdered. As far as that's how I see it at this point. They're being poisoned to death by big pharma under the lie of gender ideology.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect of my life, and how this became relevant to me. And then I was also working as an administrative assistant for a company that I still love. And I tried to sound the alarm with them last April, so a year ago, trying to give them a heads up that some of the organizations that they were supporting through donations and whatnot were actually spreading some really dangerous misinformation, like actual legitimate misinformation.
Like the real,
like for real. Yeah. Like,
just so we're clear.
Yeah. Like straight up lies that puberty blockers were completely harmless and that they were reversible, and just things that I know that our company would not really want to support if they really knew the truth. So I tried to raise awareness of the truth with them. And we're in California, so employment law here is bonkers. And gender presentation, expression, and identity are all now considered protected characteristics, just like sex, race, ethnicity, disability, gender. All the gender woo is also now protected, as though these are immutable characteristics. Right. And so I knew that, I knew my company was in between a rock and a hard place because of what it means to be operating a business in the state of California.
Yeah.
But I also feel like it's really important that people take a stand against human rights violations.
And that you make them aware of what it is they're pushing.
Yes.
At least they're not aware of it.
Yeah. And so our company started putting pronouns on name badges and started putting, pronouns in email signatures, and would display the Progress Pride flag and for the whole month of June. And then again, we're donating money to organizations. And I know that their compassion was being weaponized against them, just like it is. Most people's compassions are being weaponized by this ideology. So, but I'm very inspired by what Dr. Martin Luther King said in his letter from a Birmingham jail, where we have a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. That's what we have to do here. These are unjust laws. This ideology is leading to human rights violations, so we have to speak up about them. So my initial letter was somewhat well received, but they responded right away. So I had sent links and all sorts of things.
So you knew they hadn't researched it?
Yes. Yeah. And then I was called into HR because I had 2 stickers on my water bottle. So one was
no, not a sticker.
Yeah, I know. Watch out. So one was this sticker, so woman, adult, human, female, and then the other sticker I actually have on my little bullhorn is
feminist, defending the rights of biological females. Oh my.
We cannot have any of that. So
they called you into HR. So someone reported you for...
Yeah. And so they said that because I was currently working with someone who was currently transitioning, if I had these stickers on my water bottle as an intentional act of disrespect, then it would be a violation of our company's policy of respect.
Wow.
And I said, well, they're not an intentional act of disrespect. It's a celebration of my identity as a member of a protected class based on my biological sex.
Yes. Oh, so you using their own rules. You have to, you're like, okay.
Yeah, you gotta know the
what are their rules? Okay. Protected class myself here.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did they
so the response to that was, well, imagine if it was a racist statement.
Like, imagine if it was, I just want to say this was White Lives Matter.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. They would do that as
well. Well, and that's pretty much what, and I said, well, it's not a racist statement.
Yeah.
And I said, and it's not making a statement about any other group. It's making a statement about who I am, and that I'm proud to be a woman, and that I'm proud to defend the rights that women before me have fought so hard for. And I said that I thought it was really hypocritical because nobody would ever be asked to remove a rainbow sticker from their water bottle or a trans pride sticker.
No.
And I said, I find those to be triggering because when I see a trans pride sticker, I'm triggered because I know my loved one is dying.
Right.
Because he was, they're taken advantage of by this ideology. And I know what it's like to be victimized by a sexual predator too. And I know that predators are using the cover of these identities to gain access to their prey of choice. But I did tell them I would not use that water bottle at work anymore.
Wow.
And then in October of last year, I was told that someone, because of comments I had made regarding gender ideology, someone felt hurt, sad, and uncomfortable. And so I was told, I could keep my job. I would have been taken out of a position of trust, but I could keep my job provided I agreed to not talk about these things anymore. Or I could leave. So I left. So I wasn't exactly fired.
You were given an ultimatum, and
Yeah. But it's like I told them, and I said, I get it. You guys are operating in the state of California. And they said, well, until the laws change. And I said, well, the only way they're going to change is if people in positions of power and influence start getting brave and start speaking out.
like Martin Luther King said.
Yeah. So there's that. And then I also have 2 children. They're now 13 and 11. And a couple years ago, I first started bringing my concerns to my son's science teacher, because in California, starting in the 5th grade, the state mandates that gender identity, presentation, and expression are taught in science.
Wow. Wow.
So
That's for people outside of the state, I don't think they realize how bad, because it started so much earlier in California than it has in some of the other states. I mean, it's everywhere now.
Yeah.
But it's been there for a while.
Yeah. So they put it in science under family life. So you can opt out of it, but a lot of people don't know that it's even in there. And so I started having a conversation with my son's science teacher a couple years ago. And I was really dismissed as being bigoted and, phobic. And I tried to explain again, listen, I have a loved one. I totally thought that this was the right thing to do, but now I realize it's not. My loved one is still profoundly mentally unwell. That none of this works,
And now all these physical issues.
And now there's, yes. So suicide has not been avoided. Now it's just a slow suicide, to quote a detransitioner I was just listening to the other day. So, but then this year, so in September, I guess into August, on the first day of school, both of my sons were asked by 3 separate teachers for their preferred pronouns on getting to know you questionnaires. And so that ended up in immediate conversations with the teachers and the principals involved.
Can we pause here for a second? I want to show people one of your appearances at a school board meeting, and it's very short, and it's about pronouns, and I think it'll help us move into this next part of the conversation. This is on Colin Wright shared this. He's a friend of the show. We've interviewed him before. He does a lot of great work on this gender ideology. And so he shared this and said, this brave mom powerfully denounces gender ideology at the, is that Davis?
Yep.
Yeah, Davis Joint
Unified School District
Board of Trustees hearing on November 17th. Quote, asking our kids for their preferred pronouns is not kind. It is not inclusive. What is kind about forcing our kids to wonder if they may have been born in the wrong body? I'm going to just play this because I think it's so inspiring.
Hello, a bit of a subject change real quick here. My comments are for Davis parents and guardians. I urge you all to have face-to-face meetings with your kids, principals, and teachers to learn how gender is being taught to our students. Do you know that our teachers are asking our kids for their preferred pronouns? Both my 10 and 12-year-old were asked this by multiple teachers on the first day of school. This question is not kind. It is not inclusive. What is kind about forcing our kids to wonder if they may have been born in the wrong body? Gender ideology tells boys who like dresses that maybe they're really meant to be girls. So they should take puberty blockers that stunt them, cross-sex hormones that sterilize them, and surgeries that make them medical patients for life. Nothing about that message is kind. Kindness is simple. Tell boys who like dresses it's okay for boys to like dresses. Inclusivity is simple. Tell those boys they are still included in boyhood. What they like or dislike can't make them more or less of a boy, because being a boy is a male human child. This cannot be changed through social pressure, drugs, or surgeries. Of course, the same goes for gender nonconforming girls. Again, I urge you to get curious. Find out exactly what your kids are being taught. Practice kindness and inclusivity by letting kids be kids, and remind them no child is born in the wrong body.
I would love to hear a standing ovation then.
Not going to get it in that room, that's for sure.
You were speaking in probably an incredibly hostile room, right? Because it's Davis, California.
Yeah. So just to give you the context, I chose that particular school board meeting because our teachers have been locked in contract negotiations with the district, because our district is notorious for paying our teachers really poorly. So Davis has this reputation of having some of the best schools around, and yet they pay their teachers the lowest wages of any of the surrounding school districts.
Wow.
And so our teachers our district just hemorrhages great teachers, and has been for a while. So I knew that meeting was going to be really, really well attended, because all the teachers were showing up.
Wow. Okay.
and so I was like, oh, it's got to be at this meeting, because we don't normally have that many people in our school board meetings, although they have been getting a little bit more spicy now, so they're becoming better attended. But that was a jam-packed room full of really angry teachers.
And now at this point, had you already met with the school so they knew you were displeased about this pronoun policy?
I had already met with 2 principals and a couple of teachers.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah. And so you can see some of the people in the back in the audience, they're holding up these signs that say Davis kids deserve the best. And you can see on the back of one, somebody flipped it over and wrote, "This is false."
Yeah.
And she's like waving at "This is false" behind me when I'm saying that
that's not kind. Yeah. Let's talk about this, because I think what you're doing here is absolutely what people should be doing. You're not playing by their rules. In this case, you're not allowing them to dominate, to set the rules for language. So I used to be in the social justice cult. They're very concerned with controlling language and the way we speak about things, because that, of course, Orwell's written about this. That's the way you control the way that we think, is if you can constrict our thoughts by our use of language. And you're not allowing them to claim the moral high ground of kindness and inclusivity. And I love that. Like, your big picture, no. Like, let's start there. No, that's not kind and inclusive. So for anyone who might be watching from the left, who maybe like yourself 13 years ago, or like me 10 years ago, who's just kind of absorbed this ideology in their surroundings, in their cultural echo chamber, that it is kind and inclusive to automatically ask for pronouns. And yeah, why shouldn't we be asking kids what their pronouns are? All kids, 100% of kids, what are your pronouns? Can you explain that? Like, what is unkind about asking an 8-year-old for preferred pronouns?
Well, it's like I said, it forces them to consider that their bodies might be wrong.
Yes.
Right? Because if there is such a thing as a child who has pronouns that are not consistent with their biological sex, well, if such a thing exists, such a person exists, then maybe I'm that person too.
Yes.
And especially the timing of it, at least with my kids, they're about to start puberty. And puberty is a universally uncomfortable human experience. Yeah. I don't think there's a single human who is like, this is fantastic.
People feel uncomfortable in their body.
I want puberty to last longer. I mean, I've still got the cystic acne from puberty. That was a long time ago. So, so it's just this really destabilizing thing for a child to have to think about, because I don't think anybody's born in the wrong body. I don't think that's possible. But to make a child think that, and think of all the kids that have actual physical disabilities. What are we telling them?
Yeah.
You know, kids that it's just, yeah, it is a bait and switch in terms of kindness. It's
I'll say
you know,
another way for anyone listening is, before this became so mainstream and such a trend in the past few years, not only have the number of gender clinics just exploded, they've increased like 1900% or something, but the number of kids saying they're trans has exploded. It's off the charts. But it used to be that only like less than 1% of the population went to the doctor and expressed that they had feelings of gender dysphoria, like being uncomfortable in their body with their biological sex. Like less than 1% of people have ever dealt with this question and had to deal with this question, with this mental health issue, this mental unwellness issue. Now we're telling 100% of kids in kindergarten even, hey, you might be born in the wrong body, like it's normal, like it's not a mental health issue, like it's not something abnormal. 100% of kids, you should figure it out,
yeah, it's one more thing you get to choose.
Exactly.
You get to choose this. Well,
Exactly.
no, we don't get to choose this. We don't get to just live in a fantasy make believe world. And good luck once you've convinced somebody that they can get to just choose whatever.
Yeah.
Reality will bite them.
Yeah.
We're making really, really fragile people,
Yes.
because we're telling kids that they can create their own world and have other people buy into whatever their version of reality is, and then reality is going to come along and smash them.
Mother Nature will win.
Yes.
And it's just a matter of how much damage happens, and how damaging that is. And I think people like you, I think people who are waking up and becoming, feeling compelled to say something, it's because they can see that coming. Like what's that expression? You sow the wind and you reap the whirlwind, or you reap the tornado. I forget what it is, but it's basically like we're sowing the wind and we're like, oh, there's no consequences coming because they're kind of far off. My pastor talks about this. He says he thinks the culture wars is the way he describes it is as a war on reality, which is kind of what you just said. So interesting. He's like, if you jump off a building, the consequences of gravity are immediate. And we know this, but because the consequences of denying biological reality are a little bit further down the path, we think they're not going to catch up with us. We're going to see the results with all these kids as they grow up.
Well, and that's for people who don't have kids or who have kids. So like my kids are fairly inoculated against this, right? Because this is something I talk to them about a lot, and they know my loved one. It's one of their loved ones too. So they can see that this hasn't worked. So, my husband, when I first started getting really vocal about this, he's like, well, why? Our kids are going to be fine. Why are you even worried about this? And it's because none of us will escape unscathed if we allow an entire generation to become completely unmoored from what it means to be a human. And if we simultaneously compel them to lie. That's what we're doing. We're compelling children to say they know they see a boy when they know they're actually looking at a girl.
Yeah.
We're compelling them to participate in this lie. Even the ones who we think are safe from it because they know and they understand biology, or they have a better grasp on reality. There's only so much lying that you can do before you start to believe in the lie yourself.
Or it starts to make you sick.
Yeah.
Your soul is sick, I think.
Yes. So it's just, I think it's so important that we speak the truth. And kids really need us to step up to the plate right now. They absolutely need us to step up to the plate right now. We had a demonstration in January in front of our high school, and we stood out there with signs in front of the high school as class was getting out. And the sign said things like, no child is born in the wrong body, and gender ideology is anti-science. And I had two separate kids come up to me. One was a young man, and he came up to me and he asked me what we were doing. And I explained, why these moms were standing out in the rain with a bunch of signs in front of the high school. And he thanked me and he said, most of the kids who go to the school can't even do math, let alone make choices that are going to affect their bodies for the rest of their lives.
Yes.
And then another young woman came up and she thanked me as well. And she said, thank you so much for standing up for our rights. You have no idea how much pressure they put on us. And that's, the amount of messaging that our kids are being, the amount of messaging that's being shoved down their throats is insane. They have flyers all over the campus. There's gender student clubs all over the campus. It's just constant. It's constant. It's a constant onslaught. And they don't have a place to go where they can just be pro-reality.
Away from the propaganda.
Yeah.
It's like it is.
There's no pro-reality clubs on campus right now. There's no
reality club.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things we want to start doing. We want to start making some pro-reality spaces for our kids.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're in a really desperate time right now because a lot of kids have already been captured. A lot of children have already been captured. And so we need everybody stepping up to the plate right now for the sake of this memory.
Let me share something with you and get your opinion on it. I think I know what your opinion is going to be, but I'm sharing this. I've shared it once already on my podcast, but I think it's the kind of thing that has the potential maybe to open some eyes on the left. When you're talking about the pressure, like that female student said to you, like, there's so much pressure around us. I'm in a lot of these parents of trans kids groups on Facebook and these private groups, and they don't allow any dissenting opinions. It's exactly what you talked about, like confirm, affirm and validate and immediately move these kids into transition. And so this is a parent. I finally shared this online yesterday because I see a lot of crazy stuff in these groups. This one she says she's the non-binary mom of an 8-year-old trans girl. If you read on, you'll find out it's a boy, an 8-year-old boy.
Sure.
And then she says she's been her authentic self basically her whole life. She's what we would call gender fluid and doesn't have any issues with being both a boy and a girl. And we don't do gender norms in our world, and we value all body parts as they are, but she is a she. Again, talking about a boy. Recently, she started standing to pee. This makes me feel uncomfortable. Obviously, nothing is or will ever be said as I don't let her know that I noticed this. I honestly didn't even intend to notice. I've just caught it out of the corner of my eye. I don't care that she's standing. It doesn't bother me, like, as far as saying anything. I don't think it's a problem is what I mean. I love that she's comfortable standing and sitting. I love that she uses her boy parts. Yes, girls have penises too. And this has helped tremendously with zero gender dysphoria so far. But it makes me feel weird for some reason. And then she goes on to ask for help and ask the other parents, am I overthinking this? Why does it bother me that she, meaning her 8-year-old boy, her 8-year-old son, is standing to pee? I'm going to stop sharing this now, but what are your initial thoughts about what it's like for that 8-year-old growing up in that house?
It must just be sheer chaos. It must just be absolute chaos in that house for that child. Kids need structure. Kids are, the world is a big, scary, confusing place for kids.
Yeah.
And so they rely on their parents and their family to help them make sense of the world and give them guardrails and discipline. And it's not a bad word, but
Right.
just like guardrails, guidelines. Here's things to follow and truth. And so I think, and then there are some things that kids really don't need explained to them at all, because we as human beings have inherited billions of years of evolution as a sexually dimorphic species. Kids know boys from girls, men from women. They don't even need to have that explained to them. That's a biological inheritance. So to have,
even my dog knows. I just want to say my dog can tell the difference between men and women.
we all can. We all can. Yes. Yeah. Well, and back to Colin Wright, right? It's sexual dimorphism is in the plant, insect, and animal kingdom everywhere. There's no escaping it.
This sounds like science, Allie.
I know, yeah. Well, that's science, that pesky science again. But yeah, I think that poor child, I can't imagine how destabilizing it must be. They're already just little kids confused about the world around them, but then to take something that they shouldn't be confused about at all, which is just their sex, and rip that to shreds.
Gaslighting them from like a very young age.
Awful. It's so awful.
I brought that up. I know that seems extreme to a lot of people. That kind of craziness is not uncommon in a lot of these parents groups because, well, part of the reason I think is because they do function like cults and anyone with any dissenting opinion gets kicked out. So necessarily you're only in a group with people who are speaking the same orthodoxy. It can tend to get more and more extreme and kind of insane in these groups. So it's pretty common, that kind of stuff in the groups. The other thing that's common is seeing like that one. I picked it specifically because I see a lot of them like this, where there's this, what you mentioned at the school, this sort of unseen pressure, these rewards and incentives that the parents or peer groups or the schools are setting up, cultures setting up for kids to incentivize them to say, well, I think I'm trans too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because we're celebrating it.
Yeah.
We're celebrating it. This isn't a question of destigmatizing a mental illness. This is a question of celebrating and replicating a mental illness as quickly as we possibly can. I'm all for destigmatizing mental illness. I think that is a noble aim, but that is so that we can get people who are suffering from mental illness the actual compassionate, proper help to treat them so that they can live in reality and accept themselves and accept their bodies. And it doesn't really matter what the mental illness is. The compassionate thing to do is to get them proper treatment and help.
Yeah.
It is not compassionate to celebrate their mental illness, affirm that it's the truth, and then try to get a bunch of other people to have the same issues.
Yeah.
That's not going to go anywhere good.
Like starting with children.
Yes.
So can I ask you about, so you speak at school board meetings now. We're going to, like I said, there's going to be a few linked below if you guys want to go watch some more of Allie speaking. Can you tell me about the first time you chose to speak? And did you have nerves? Were you scared? Do you still get scared going into these rooms and telling your opinion?
Yeah. Well, I think the first time I chose to speak publicly was at Kelly J. Keene's Let Women Speak event in San Francisco. So I've been a big fan of hers for a few years, ever since I saw her on the Trigonometry podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen that particular
Yes,
interview
I
of
have.
hers? Yeah. That was it was the first time for me that I felt like I could take a deep breath and I could actually say out loud the things that I had been feeling but had been too afraid to say.
Yeah.
And and then I'd watched her speakers corners from afar. So hearing that she was coming to the States, I was like, oh, hell yeah, I'm there.
San Francisco, no less.
Yeah. Well, we were right in front of Senator Scott Wiener's pumpkin carving contest, drag queen pumpkin carving contest for kids. So, so it was a really, really special time, and I was afraid to speak, but we actually really lucked out because we didn't have any protesters or any violent TRAs coming after us at that event. But it was, I was nervous, but that really helped me open the door, helped me, find my voice more publicly. And I had just been let go from work. So I felt very free.
Sense of freedom, right?
I wanted.
I get that. I get it. When I left my old job in entertainment, I used to sell woke TV shows.
Yeah.
Once I left that, it was like, I could say whatever I want. Like I took I was making a good money doing that TV stuff. Now I'm like, I don't care. I'll sell fruits on the highway as long as I can say what I want.
I can say the
freedom. Freedom feels so good. Okay, so you have that sense of freedom.
So good. Yeah. So then that November, that clip that you just played of me, that was the first time I have spoken in front of our school board for other things. I spoke out against, because our school board opted to keep our kids in masks for an entire month after our ridiculous state had still had our kids in masks for too long. Anyway, so I'd spoken at our school board meetings before, but this was the first time where I was going to tackle the gender woo-woo, which is, really, that's just next level target on your back kind of thing. Especially in our town. But I was definitely nervous. I do still get nervous. I do still get afraid, but I practice a lot. I mean, so our school board gives us 90 seconds usually, which isn't that much time.
Yeah.
And at first, I was kind of like, I think I spoke for like 8 minutes at Kelly J's. And now if I go back and I watch that, I'm like, God, I'm just going on and on and on.
Yeah.
Now that I'm used to it.
Now you can get it down.
90 seconds. Yeah.
And you really pulled it like that. We just watched that clip, that 90-second clip, and you fit a lot in there and you do it in an easy to understand way. You're very good at it.
Well, I thank you. I appreciate that. But I kind of look at it as like a verbal tweet at this point. Like I've got very little time, so no fat is allowed. You got to trim every little word down. And I practice it so that I can say it at a speed that is intelligible. So I'm just kind of giving tips if people want to start speaking at school board meetings.
Here, what advice would you have? Advice and tips for parents. And anyone listening, look, Allie's in the Lion's Den. She's in Davis, California, and she's speaking in what can be very hostile rooms. So from someone who has that experience, what would you tell parents? What's your advice? What tips, especially if they're afraid?
Well, I mean, when you're afraid, I mean, it's important to know what you're afraid of, right? Because I think actually, and I don't mean to go off on too much of a tangent here, but the biggest mistakes I've ever made in my life were because I was afraid of something. But that's not to say that you shouldn't listen to your fears, right? But in this case, what are you afraid of? Kelly, this is one of the things that Kelly J frequently talks about too. I'm far more afraid of what will happen if we continue to be quiet, if we continue to allow all of our children to be lied to and encouraged to lie, and we allow their boundaries to be broken, and we allow them to become sexualized. Like, that is far more terrifying to me than being called any kind of name or a bigot or whatever, because I know what I am and I know what I'm not. I know I'm not I know I'm not a bigot. I know I'm not a homophobe. In fact, this ideology is profoundly homophobic. It's doing such damage to gay, lesbian, and bisexual people on so many levels. So when I'm afraid, then I think about, well, what am I really afraid of? Well, if I'm far more afraid of what's going to happen if, we allow this transhumanist agenda to continue, then my fear of speaking in public is really not that big of a deal.
Nailed it. This is exactly on my path. I've talked about it in a similar way. It wasn't until I became more afraid of the consequences of not speaking.
Right.
And that when that fear became bigger, then it's like you can handle those other fears. What about parents who think, what are some of the consequences of doing this? Like parents who fear social consequences, maybe, or like you said, having a target on your back in the community, or being.
Yeah.
What are some things that have happened to you, and are they that big of a deal? Are they not?
Well, again, I think it's like anything. There's pros and cons.
Yeah.
So that November clip that you played, that clip was seen by a mother in my town who had been suffering basically by herself for the last 4 years while she watched her daughter, who has rapid onset gender dysphoria, while she watched her daughter reject her biology and become estranged from her. And so this mother saw what I said, and she said it was like a huge weight was just lifted off her shoulders, because she didn't think there was a single person in Davis willing to come up and speak out loud against this. And so she ended up reaching out on Facebook, trying to find me, and a couple other mothers sent me screenshots with her information, so I was able to connect with her. And then since November, she and I have just been poking all the tigers in our town together.
Wow.
So we've just been on a tiger poking rampage. So she's part of a group called Our Duty, which is a group for parents who have children suffering from rapid onset gender dysphoria. So it's a support group for parents. It's an international group, but she's part of the California chapter. And so she had a lot of people that she was networking with, and including but not limited to a woman named Erin Friday. Erin Friday is the co-lead of Our Duty here on the West Coast. And she has been fighting tooth and nail in our state assembly and Senate, trying to fight against bad bills, but also trying to establish good bills that will preserve parental rights and child safeguarding. So my friend and I, we've managed to network a lot in our town and also in our county. And we have since had multiple events. We force our library to hold true to their mission. And we have had several events now in our library. So the first one was in February. We did a Brave Books reading, which I was not. Are you familiar with Brave Books?
No.
I hadn't been either until one of the other moms in our group mentioned that she'd like to do it. It's Brave Books is a book publisher. I think it was founded by Kirk Cameron, who's an evangelical Christian.
Oh, right. Okay.
And they publish books that other publishers won't publish anymore because they are religious in nature or various things. I haven't read all the books, but we ended up doing a Brave Book reading at our library. And it was just a positive book event. But of course, we were labeled as, homophobes
Hateful.
and hateful. And we were supported by or sponsored by Moms for Liberty of Yolo County.
Oh, I love
They're the group who my friend and I have been, kind of organizing events under their auspices. And then in March, we had a film screening for the film Affirmation Generation. Have you seen that yet?
I haven't seen that yet.
Oh, yeah, definitely make a note of that.
Okay.
Affirmation Generation is an exceptional documentary film. It follows the story of 6 detransitioners as they share their experiences and the medical harms that they've suffered. And it has 12 experts, so pediatrician, endocrinologists, therapists, and it cites, I believe, 45 high-quality peer-reviewed journals as well.
Wow.
To discuss how gender ideology is really harming an entire generation that are being affirmed in this mental illness. So that's a great film. And we were able to have a film screening for it in our library. And Joey Bright is the executive producer of that film, and she is in the Bay Area. So she came out and she was our guest speaker. So that was our event in March. And then just in April, we had Colin Wright come out to our library and gave an engaging discussion on the binary nature of sex. And then I was able to present kind of the Davis parent perspective, some of the things that my friend and I have found out about how our school district teaches gender ideology and where it's located within our schools and our school district. And then Colin Wright also published an article about how our district policies have actually led to a huge increase in trans-identifying children. So like way higher than national average, our district. So he was able to explain his analysis of how our district policies are actually creating so-called trans kids. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then our next event that we've got planned for later this month, we're going to do a book curation for child safeguarding, where we look at some of the books that we have in our schools and in our county libraries, some of the ones that have blatant pornography in them and all sorts of really damaging messaging. So that'll be upcoming. And so to answer that question in a really long way, speaking out at my school board meetings has led to this incredible networking. And, it spreads like COVID,
Truth. I think courage spreads. Fear can spread like that, but so can courage.
Yeah, it can. And I say that, I've said that too. It's like, you never know when a question is going to plant a seed in somebody's mind, and you never know when your courage is going to lead to someone else's.
Yes.
So when you feel afraid of being called bad names or of public speaking or things like that, try to hold in your heart, one, you've got the truth on your side, right? Yeah. You are on the right. You are not on the right, like a political.
You are in the right.
You are in the right. Thank you. Because there's nothing political about saying it's wrong to sterilize and mutilate children.
This is not a left or right thing.
It's not a political statement. Yeah. So when you're afraid, hold in your heart that you have the truth on your side, and know that your courage could very well lead to somebody else's. And the more people that get courageous, the faster this stops.
Yes.
And we've got to end it like now.
Yeah. I am just blown away by not just your courage and, you're very articulate, your ability to talk about these issues in very condensed fashion at the meetings and all of that. But I'm just blown away by your energy and all the stuff that you're doing. These other parents, it's exciting,
Well,
inspiring.
it's not just me. It's a group effort for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that that's so important, because that first November meeting, I had 2 people come with me. They were sitting by my side through the meeting. They weren't going to speak, but they at least came and sat with me.
Yeah.
But it definitely felt very much, very lonely.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like that at all now. I mean, now there's every time my friend and I get together and we have these meetings and we start strategizing about what we're going to do next to help her raise awareness, and more and more people join us. And
Yeah.
so, and it takes a group. It really does, because we have different strengths. My friend she's starting to come forward a little bit more publicly now, but she still is more behind the scenes, but she's filing Public Record Act requests. She's sending those emails.
Yeah. We all have different talents.
Yeah, we have different. And Erin Friday, as a former attorney, is just such a great understanding of the law. And, she's never been in politics before, but she's got a great head on her shoulders, and she's learning how the political apparatus works, and she's helping teach other people so that we can take this to our elected officials. So yeah, we all have different strengths, and once you start networking, it makes it a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I wanted to say, I think it's amazing you're doing this in the belly of the beast in California, because so many people are of the opinion that it's lost and it's time to move, and you're like, no, I'm gonna stay and fight.
well, my husband and I go back and forth, back and forth. We really love our state. And my husband's family's been here
Mhm.
since 1865.
Wow.
So our
Yeah,
kids are 6th generation Davis.
yeah,
So, I mean, at a certain point, we may not be able to afford to live here anymore, because
right.
we don't own anything. But I don't want to leave necessarily, because we still really but at a certain point, I mean, the state has done everything they can, and continues to do everything they can to make it really easy to take your kids.
They're
Really easy.
Yeah, if you don't validate gender
Really easy.
ideology, they could take your children.
Yes, absolutely. You don't even need one of the bills that they just passed through assembly hearing was AB 665. And that is a child 12 years or older, any medical professional, including school counselors, can take a child. I'm trying to remember the exact terminology, but basically a 12-year-old kid can go to school and tell their counselor that they have a gender identity. And if the counselor says, well, do you think your parents support it? And they say, no, I don't think my parents will support it. That counselor can then decide, okay, well, we're going to send you to an affirming facility.
Wow.
So your kid could then potentially not come home from school that day.
Wow.
AB 665 is a combination of 2 bills that had already passed. But in the combination of those 2 bills, it took out the language that would mean that there needed to be a claim of abuse in the house. So there doesn't need to be any kind of claim of abuse for a child to be taken now, as if it's a gender issue, if it's a gender affirmation issue. That's what this bill would do. And there's so many bad bills. So I've been able to sit in the assembly hearings for over the last couple months, several times. And then I was just in the Senate hearing a couple weeks ago too. And it's really shocking to watch our legislators and just the complete disregard they have for we the people.
Yeah.
It's absolutely.
Do they have contempt for the people? Some of them?
It would appear that way. I mean, I was sitting in the Senate hearing, they were about to vote on SB 14, which would make child sex trafficking a felony, because it's not currently a felony, shockingly.
Wow.
So Senator Scott Wiener, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him.
Unfortunately.
Very bad dude.
Yeah.
Like born with horns and a tail level. Bad. Yeah. Bad dude. So he and Senator Nancy Skinner, who I think is one of his handmaidens, they just sat and had a conversation with each other while a woman was testifying. She was a survivor of child sex trafficking, but her younger sister didn't make it. Her younger sister perished. And they're only given 2 minutes to testify. She had a 2-minute testimony, and they were just having a conversation.
Just ignoring her.
Just completely ignoring her for 2 minutes while she talks about what it was like to endure that level of torture and then lose her sister. I cannot imagine what was so damn important that they couldn't pretend to care for 2 minutes. They don't even pretend. And I was sitting next to Erin Friday, and I was like, is that normal? She's like, yeah, they do it all the time. So people just don't even know. People don't know what I've been complacent for too long, is what I'm understanding now. And I'm not going to be complacent anymore. Now I'm paying attention to the people who are making the rules that we all have to live by, including at the local level, right? Because I just was lazy and content to think that people in those positions were in it for the right reason. It's so naive now.
Honey, I was so naive
to say those things now.
One of the biggest.
Oh my God.
I used to think, this is how naive I am. I used to think that people rose up in politics or in positions of power because they were good people and they had a good reputation. So people would help them out because they were good. And now I'm realizing, I think it's some of the worst people ever who rise in positions of power, and they rise because they all have blackmail material on each other about how evil they are. And so it just seems like, I'm going to go do that guy a favor because otherwise he's going to out me about this, or I'm going to support this. It's a bunch of like,
because why would good people want to go into it?
Yeah. Also
it's so terrifying. I wouldn't, I don't know. I don't know how to fix this. I really don't.
Well, I think you're doing the first step is you're just speaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're just
speaking. So, and at the school board meetings, and I've mentioned this before to others too, like in that November clip, our school board is very captured. So I know that it doesn't really matter what I say to them in those meetings. They're going to still, hopefully I planted a seed. But by and large, at least in our town, our school board is captured. So I just use their platform to speak to my community. That's why I addressed the parents and guardians of Davis when I spoke. So I think there's still, for those people who say, well, there's no point in speaking at a school board meeting, I do still think that we should take advantage of those opportunities, because you may not be able to influence those individual board members, but you never know when somebody else is going to be listening.
And look at all the people who were listening, and that mom who you inspired, who thought she was the only one or no one would ever speak. You are right. Courage spreads like wildfire, and it's not always about changing the mind of those administrators in the room. It's about who's listening and inspiring others to speak, and you are doing it, lady. So I want to thank you for all that you're doing. Tell people where they can find you online, if they want to follow you, if they want to keep up with what you're doing, if they have questions for you.
Yeah. So I'm pretty much only on Twitter at this point. I'm not a professional or anything. I'm just a mom. So my Twitter handle is Snyder, not snarky.
And we have that below, guys. Snide,
Yeah.
not snarky.
And so I'm on Twitter there. And I do want to just say a couple more things that I
Please.
think are important. As great as speaking in the school board meetings are, just face-to-face conversations are so powerful. I am a firm believer in being the billboard. Kelly J. Keene's campaign of just walking around wearing the truth courageously. I get so many great conversations and comments when I walk around in my Be the Billboard gear. And that, I think, is the single most impactful thing in my life in terms of being able to help turn this around, because I've never had anybody come up to me with anything negative to say about it.
Wow.
It's always people. Yeah, it's always people who are relieved. They come up and they say, "Wow, I love your shirt."
Yeah.
And then we have a conversation.
Yeah.
It's incredible how much relief other people get when I walk around like this.
Yeah.
Because they feel like they can say something out loud because they know I'm safe to talk to about
I
it.
experienced this in a different way during the COVID policies. Some of the policies I pretty quickly at the beginning, I bought masks too, but once I read more studies and information and learned more about it, not just masks, but the virus itself, I quit wearing them. And in Texas, we had some businesses chose to say they were required, but I just would test the boundaries. So we have a big chain called HEB. HEB never enforced it. They had the signs up, they had people at the doors passing them out, or who would offer them to you. But I always was of the opinion, well, I'll just make them tell me I have to, and then I'll do it if they tell me that. But they never did. So that's how I found out they didn't enforce it. And you would walk in, they'd say, "Would you like a mask?" And I'd be like, "Oh no, I couldn't possibly." And keep and just keep going. and they never said anything. So anyway, long story short, you're right, because people would see me, and this happened more than once. People would come up to me in a mask and be like, did they not make you wear it? I was like, "Oh no, they don't. Just try it next. Just take." I had people take off their mask with me, like in the store, like, "Well, I'm not wearing it." I'm like, "Okay, well, good." But they just, that act of seeing someone, and then they're like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow,
It
she didn't
spreads.
just spontaneously burst into flames.
Yeah. It spreads. So
Yeah.
you've had people approach you. I am shocked, though, that no one said anything negative to you.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's coming. I don't know, but it hasn't happened yet. And I get a lot of comments about it, a lot. Maybe because people who disagree with it maybe are too afraid of approaching somebody who's so bold to wear it. I don't know. I don't know. But it just hasn't happened. It's only been positive. And so really, really helpful. And then as far as more advice for parents, luckily I don't have kids who are struggling with any kind of gender dysphoria or anything like this. But I do just want to really encourage parents to have conversations with their children. A lot of parents have asked me, like, well, when is too early to talk about these things? And it's never too early to reassure your child that it's impossible to be born in the wrong body. It's never too early. And you can't do that too often.
You almost have to inoculate them now
against misinformation. You have to do it now because, you may want to say, well, you just want to preserve their innocence and not have to talk to them about things like this. But other people will talk to them first.
Yeah.
So you have to get ahead of it. You have to ask them what they understand already about biology to get a feel for it, because they are so immersed in it. It's not just the school messaging, it's their friends, it's whatever they're seeing online, it's their screen time, it's their entertainment, it's everywhere. So they may have already started to think that it's possible to be born in the wrong body. So start having conversations with them now and all the time about biology. I give my kids pop quizzes all the time where I ask them to define what a woman is, right? And a rooster and and all those things, right?
A dog.
Because a dog, but it's not but it's very curious that it's only human women that are losing our own term to describe ourselves, right?
Right.
Every single species has a male and a female name to describe that species, hen and rooster, right? But for some reason, it's women who are now, oh, well, biological female. That takes away our humanity when you take the human out of the word woman, right, to describe us.
Right.
So talk to kids, talk to your children about biology, talk to them about the importance of speaking the truth and not letting other people compel their speech. We practice what to say if somebody asks for their preferred pronouns. So there's a couple things that we say in our house. We say we don't follow that practice.
I love that.
And we say, I say, I'm not going to tell you how to speak.
Yeah.
I want to re-normalize, or I refuse to compel your speech. I want to re-normalize that we don't get to tell other people how to speak or how to think. And so when somebody asks for my preferred pronouns and say, oh, I'm not going to tell you how to talk, that's putting it on them. That's me showing that I'm respecting them and their ability to speak and choose their own words.
It's also re-normalizing reality, which is the reality is, like you mentioned earlier, everyone can tell you're a woman. What are they going to do when you're like, I'm not going to tell you to speak? And they're like, but what are you?
Yeah.
It's
well, I had that in one of before I was let go. We were in a Zoom meeting, and everybody. It was enforced that you had to give your pronouns. And I said, I respectfully decline to give my pronouns. Everybody can use whatever pronouns they want for me. Like, I'm not going to play that game. And by the way, I'm not going to let you compel my speech either.
Yeah.
And then be very, very careful with screens and phones. Really, really careful. That's another thing that I just really want to advise.
Parents.
Yeah, because with my loved one, I watched them try to process their childhood trauma by they got really, their coping was video games. And at the time, wasn't really internet and things like that when they were processing their trauma or trying to cope with their trauma. So it was all video games all the time. And I really think that that's when the disassociation with their body started. Because I think there's several reasons why somebody might come to claim a trans identity. But I think that for my loved one, it was trauma and then a disassociation with their body into this kind of virtual world.
Fantasy.
And I see a lot of that right now. A lot of people living in a virtual world. Goes back to what we were saying along, where kids are kind of creating their own reality. Well, it's really easy to do when you're in video games or you're on screens all the time. So I was really tough with my kids. Prior to COVID, they had like 0 screen time. They still don't have phones. They get to play 45 minutes of Minecraft on a Saturday and 45 minutes of Minecraft on a Sunday if they get all their chores done. And half the time they don't even do that because they've got other stuff to do. So, I mean, like other fun things to do. But there is a well-established line now from video games and anime to online porn to autogynephilia and transgender identities. Not everybody claiming a transgender identity as autogynephile. I understand that, but there's been a huge uptick in autogynephilia, and I think that is directly linked to some of the really terrible sissy porn and things like that, and that goes all the way back to video games. So I know parents it's like, oh, I can't get my kid away from their phone or off their phone or something, but from the mothers I've spoken to who have kids suffering from rapid onset gender dysphoria, when they are successful in getting their kids out of it, they take the phone away. That's like one of the first things they do, because so much of this is being pumped into them online. And
in that group I mentioned, the parents of one of the other most disturbing posts I've ever seen. I saw this one about a year ago. was a parent whose biological daughter, but, of course, referred to her daughter as a son the whole time. Her 12 or 13-year-old son was kidnapped by a man that he met online on the phone in these forums and raped, taken to a hotel, raped. Fortunately, she got her child back. The police were able to track the communications, and her child wasn't murdered, was returned to her, but she posted about the story, continued to call her daughter a son and everything. And in the end of it was like asking for help, saying, I don't really know what to do. I don't want to limit his time online because I know for trans kids, it was basically, they need help and support with these communities and some of these queer forums and things in order to not kill themselves. Like that was this emotional manipulation that's playing out in this mom's head of like, I can't limit where my 13-year-old goes online, even though
even though
the
they've been
consequences.
victim of child sex
Yes.
trafficking.
Yes, because I
Wow.
can't limit it because the delusion is so strong that, my child might end up killing themselves if I don't allow and permit everything. Everything,
Yeah.
and
Well,
it blows my mind.
we can.
Yeah,
Parents, you can take the
you can
phone
be a
away.
parent.
You can do it. My 13-year-old is both of my kids, because they didn't have screens really. We watched movies. We have like a crazy amount of DVDs, but we don't even have streaming service. We have very limited Wi-Fi, and we're probably using it all on this interview.
All the horsepower.
Yeah, all of it. That's the rest of the month done for us in the Snyder household. But my kids, they look at their friends, because we'll have their friends come over for slumber parties and stuff. And this one kiddo, it was his first night spending the night away from his family. And he comes over and he pulls out his tablet and he tries to connect. And we're like, oh, we don't have the internet here.
Yeah.
And it's like, his face like was so he's what? And I could just see the wheels turning, like, I'm gonna be here for 24 hours and I don't have but he ended up, we ended up having fun.
A great time.
It was fun and it was great. But my boys have noticed that their friends do not have the same level of ability to pay attention to things. They don't. Like they can't, like my boys like to watch really old movies. They can watch movies that to me, I'm like, oh my God, how is this a 7-hour movie? This is so slow. But they have the attention span
to read a book.
To read books. We read a lot of books. And they've noticed with their friends, because they want to watch a movie with their friends, and their friends like 15 minutes in are like, oh, is there, what else can we watch? What else? And they're like, but
Allie,
we're not even in the story yet.
They're 15 minutes in and they have to click out. This is, people on my podcast have heard me say this before. One of my gig jobs, one of my weekend jobs, I get to listen. I won't say what the job is. It's weird. Anyway, I get to listen to curated playlists by young people, and they don't listen. They spend time making their playlist, and then they all will listen to their favorite songs that they're all singing along with for like 30 seconds, and then they go to the next song. They can't even sit through the length of a song, and it's their favorite, and they do it again and again and again. And it's just like swiping. But I had not heard that about movies, but that makes sense. So like 15 minutes in, I can't take this anymore.
Yeah. So I mean, my boys, they want a phone. Like I feel bad, because I'm like, okay, well, my 13-year-old, all of his friends have phones. That's how they connect with each other. They don't have landlines. It's not like when we would call each other, they all communicate via text, and my son doesn't have one. And I talked to him about it, but he actually gets it. He gets it because he sees them.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't need a phone yet, Mom.
Yeah.
It's okay. I mean, we talk about why I've made the choices that I've made as far as allowing them to have screens. But he feels for his peers, because he can see how fractured their minds are. Addicted, and how they can't track, and how unhappy they are too. It's not possible for everybody, but I feel very, very grateful for what my boys do have access to.
Yeah.
They're hunters. My husband's a hunter. So they go out and they hunt and they feed our family.
Wow, you're such an anomaly in so many ways.
I know, I was going to say, I wonder if we're going to talk about that Second Amendment thing, because I was watching your post from the other day, and I was like, yeah.
I was an anomaly even when I was a leftist, because I'm originally from South Carolina, and all the men in my family hunted, and all the men in my family were military, and I just grew up with guns. So even when I was woke, I was a little bit weird in that area, because I would take woke people to the gun range.
Yeah.
I was helping to convert them in that way, but
yeah,
I
didn't grow up with any of that, but my husband did. And he comes from a long line of hunters. And so I'm really grateful that he explained to me and showed me the importance of the Second Amendment.
Why it's there, right?
And why it's there, and why it's vital to protect. And I'm so very, very grateful that he's been able to pass this down to our kids.
It backs up the First Amendment. That's why it's there.
And that's right. And they're
the easiest way to talk about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, but I really feel for other kids who are so kind of disconnected from the reality of the human experience, because they're sucked into this. I think I don't want to offend any potential people on the left who are listening, but Michael Knowles describes the phone as a portal to hell.
Yeah.
These portal to hells that we have in our pockets.
I think people on the left, if they're awake at all, and truly open-minded, which some of them still are, I know, because they're the people who eventually leave. Like, I left, and I know people who've left, so many people now who've left. There's that part of them deep down, they know it's the portal to hell, that phone, even if they don't believe in a real hell. But they know all the evil that can lead people to, all the darkness and the psychological impact, even if they describe it in those terms, the rising levels of depression, anxiety with kids through the roof.
Yeah. So keep it out of your kids' hands for as long as you possibly can. I think that's really something that I want to spread and encourage parents. If you have given them the phone, you can take it away.
You can still get it back.
You can set limits. I think that's another thing that Kelly J says. She has it where all of her kids have phones, but they know at any second they have to pass it over to her, and they have to open it up, and she gets to be able to look through exactly what they've been doing. But even that, there's so many little ways to get around and hide things, and
absolutely,
it's just put the phone down.
I love that. Very practical advice.
And totally hypocritical, because I'm on my phone all the time.
But again, you're not a child.
That's right. I can handle it.
I don't even think we have trouble handling as adults, but at least we're adults. Our brains, their brains are still developing. We have no idea. In much the same way that we're using a whole generation of kids right now as guinea pigs for this gender ideology and elective surgery, removing their body parts and stuff. We're also in another way using them as guinea pigs with these devices and what it does to your brain to be constantly wired. Because culturally, we were just like, everyone, kids too, have it, and
well, it's so convenient. I mean, I would watch, we go out to dinner or something, and I see a kid sitting at a table with a freaking device in their hands, staring at this when the adults are having a conversation around them. And that is just, it's so short-sighted for those parents to think, okay, well, this is how we're going to have a nice meal because we'll distract the kid with this device. But they're doing huge disservice to that child who's not learning how to eat dinner with a group of people.
Yes.
And how to engage and share a meal, which is huge. Sharing a meal is a huge part of the human experience and connecting. And that's another thing we take very seriously as a family, is we have family dinners. We don't have, very rarely I'll let them continue watching a movie while we're sitting at the dinner table, but it's not the norm. That TV gets shut off, whatever movie they're watching, it stops. Phones are put away. My husband and I, we don't have our phones at the dinner table either. We sit down and we enjoy a meal together.
That's the way it should
be. Restaurants everywhere, just stop relying on the device to babysit your child, because that's a really wicked babysitter who's going to be doing some serious damage to your child.
I will say the friends of mine who are parents who have like really well-behaved children, a lot of whom I've met through the church. Their children, they have different rules, they have boundaries, they acknowledge that children are different than adults. That's why we have all these different laws and things that protect them in different ways. They're not exactly the same as adults. And so their kids are able to, like, I mean, they're amazing. People compliment, they're the kind of kids that everyone wants to be around because they can listen to adults have a conversation at dinner, and they know they're polite. They know when to interrupt, or if they have a question, what to ask, or they have manners there, and they're listening, and they're little pictures, and they're picking up vocabulary, and they're learning just by watching how adults interact. And they have patience. Yeah. They have patience to sit through a conversation that may be boring to them about adult things, but they're learning patience.
Yes. And they're not going to learn that with a device in front of them. They have to learn that. There's only one way to learn that. That's through modeling. And it's really important. And yeah, when we go out with our kids, the wait staff constantly praising our kids for being so well behaved and being so polite and so courteous. And my boys open the door for me. And I do warn them, though, there will be times potentially when you will open the door for a woman and she will take that as an insult. Just know that's her. That's on her. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, that's a her issue.
That's a her issue. Yeah. But so it is really important. It's really important to teach our kids how to be around other people.
I want to make an offer to you before I let you go. If you ever do reach that point where you guys have to leave California for any reason, I will be the person who stamps your passport in Texas. I approve.
Are you sure? Because you're about to have a whole lot more people.
Oh, I know, but here's the thing. I'm all for cultural refugees. We need you. Please come. If you're a cultural refugee, we will take you and accept you, but we don't want any more cultural missionaries. Please don't come here trying to convert us to woke. No, California. Yeah. But refugees, yes.
All right. Well, I'd love to someday meet you in person. So whether we end up moving to Texas or just visiting, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Allie, for what you're doing and encouraging parents, and just really down to earth and grounded person. I love it. I would love to talk to you again. I wish you the best. Please do more interviews, and because you have a good. You're inspiring.
I'm expecting you to really edit this and make me look flawless. Okay.
I don't ever edit. I'm just like, let's do it. I just put in the little bumper ending, and I'm pretty easy. Okay. One more time. You guys can find this below, but please tell people where they can find you on Twitter.
I'm at Snyder, not Snarky.
Snyder, not Snarky.
It's a little play on my last name because
I love puns.
I'm very clever. I'm very clever like that.
Allie Snyder, thank you so much. Thank you for stopping by Deprogrammed. Thank you guys for listening. If you enjoyed this interview, please hit like, leave a comment below. It helps the algorithm so more people might see the video, and please share it, especially with, people in your life, maybe on the left who are on the fence about this issue. Share this video with them. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Carrie. Bye.
Bye.